Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth.
We are still carrying the weight.
Yeah.
And let's set aside the substance of police violence and abuse. I made my points very clearly on that. We are still carrying the weight of defund the police around.
Come on.
Now, by the way, almost no member of Congress said that.
It was a Republican talking point that you guys let them run with at you.
And so we're just the passive victims of that fact? Or can we stand up and say defunding the police is a bad idea that is opposed most intensely by African Americans? So
it's actually not a bad idea when you explain it to people as about reallocating resources. But my point being is, I do think that people on your wing of the party have hidden behind that rather than look at other issues that cost you seats, cost you votes. Like defund the police was not the reason you lost the election last year. No one was even running on it. Joe Biden increased funding to the police.
I was giving you an example. The ad that ran, the tagline of which was, "She is for they, them, and Donald Trump is for you."
Yes, Republicans are very proud of that ad.
Well, and you know, the research shows that it swung some people. And by the way, I'm not saying throw transgender Americans overboard. I'm just saying you can choose to focus on certain things and to not focus on other things. And we get that perpetually wrong in this party.
First of all, you hear the lie that this guy told? This is the reason that I keep repeating over and over again that crap that nigga Jim Clyburn was spouting when he lied saying, slogan and chaos, defund the police, that's cost us elections in 2020.
We keep making that mistake, this foolishness about you got to be this progressive or that progressive. That phrase, defund the police, cost Jamie Harrison tremendously. Now, I'm not saying it was the only problem.
You sound kind of mad, Congressman.
I want everybody in my caucus to be as practical as I am.
Now, do you notice how consistently the Democrats use virtually the exact same words whenever they're attacking black people and our issues and interests? They sit there and use weasel words. Doesn't matter if it was nigga Jim Clyburn in 2019 or this weasel Jim Himes today.
We are still carrying the weight of defund the police around.
Come on.
That phrase, defund the police, cost Jamie Harrison tremendously.
You can choose to focus on certain things and to not focus on other things. And we get that perpetually wrong in this party.
We keep making that mistake.
Defund the police was not the reason you lost the election last year. No one was even running on it. Joe Biden increased funding to the police.
I was giving you an example.
Now, I'm not saying it was the only problem.
They say the same thing. Defund the police, that cost us elections. Nobody wants that. A bunch of extremists. And then they say, well, I mean, there's other issues, but defund the police. Yeah, they always claim, well, there's other issues, but they always come to something regarding black people whenever it's time to talk about what the issues are that are costing Democrats elections. Yeah, it's not the fact that the Democrats don't stand for anything. They haven't produced for their constituents in decades. Nah, it's always something that black people are talking about. Notice that. They'll lie and claim, well, I mean, there's other things, of course. Yeah, that's what they claim, and yet whenever they actually speak on these issues, it's always something regarding black people. That's what they all consistently say. Black people are always front of mind for them when it's time to talk about, well, we lost the election. What's front of mind? What's the reason for these black people over here? There's all this defund the police stuff and all this stuff that these far left radicals are saying they need to stop all this. We losing elections. Yeah, and then when you put Jamie Harrison in charge of the DNC, what happened? Nobody was talking about defund the police, and next thing you know, the Democrats lost the House, the Senate, and the presidency. They went from a clean sweep in 2020, where all of those activists had actually swept the Democrats into total control of the government, to having the nigga Jim Clyburn wing of the party in charge, and then they lost all of it. Actually, defund the police was what saved the Democrats in 2020. Remember, that year the country had been on fire. Literally, Republicans raising pure hell about defund the police, this is what's gone wrong with America. In 2020, all of those angry young people who were taking the fight to the thugs in blue, they were also the ones who turned out to vote. They handed complete control of the government over to the Democrats. That's what happened because they were mobilized, and Democrats didn't have a problem with that, at least until the young people figured out that Biden had lied about all of his lofty promises. A White House-level police accountability commission? Lie. The George Floyd Policing Act? Lie. All of it just lies. And Clyburn lied through his buck teeth saying that defund the police lost Democrats' elections. No, it didn't. He was saying this crap in 2020 when after 7 months straight of riots and burning down police stations and having the thugs in blue literally under siege, Democrats not only took back the presidency, but they also retook the House and the Senate too. Now, the main thing that Himes and Hassan were going back and forth about throughout this entire interview was that this Himes guy voted to censure Al Green, and Himes was claiming that there was some anonymous constituent in his area. By the way, Himes won that seat from a Republican, by the way, and he claimed, well, some anonymous constituent said, you voted to censure Joe Wilson when he yelled, you lie at Barack Obama. How come you're not censuring Al Green? How come you're not supporting that? That's the line that he's hiding behind, just like he's hiding behind these fictional claims of anonymous black people who don't want to defund the police. That's what he's doing. And the truth of the matter happens to be that he kept using that as his rhetorical shield to say, well, it's the rules of decorum in the House that have to be maintained. As Democrats, we got to be better than the Republicans and their outbursts and all the rest of it. That's what he was saying. And he was sitting there saying repeatedly that it's important that Democrats set the right example and we don't want to do X, Y, Z, and it's important that we do things a certain way, etc., etc. I'm going, yeah. You sound just like all of the rest of the DNC and their little well-wishers in the left corner of the white media, basically deciding, hey, it's for the greater good that we have to ignore the reality of the 2020 election. We can't say that these police protests were what it was that actually put the Democrats in power. Same way Jim Hines was saying, well, do we really want to get in power by doing things like getting loud and boisterous and all the rest of it? Do we really want to be doing it that way? Yeah, this is about controlling people's minds. Because if you sit there and say, hey, getting tough on the police wins election, well, I mean, that's winning the wrong way. It has to be done a certain way. So you see complete uniformity, or should I say message discipline, between the propaganda arm of white supremacy and the administrative arm of white supremacy, which is what the government is. You see it, they're on the same page. It's a matter of, yeah, we know that we're lying. Yeah, we're misrepresenting what happened. We're creating fairy tale versions. But the reason that we're doing all of this lying is because, well, we don't want people getting the idea that fighting against police brutality is actually the way to win elections. We don't want that to become habit forming. We don't want that to become national policy, because that would totally upset the racialist status quo that we put in place and that we depend on for every crumb of our daily bread. So we're just going to lie because this is for the greater good. We're just going to go ahead and lie huge. So this lie that they're telling, this is meant to point at black voters and say, you people better stop making demands. It's costing us elections. Now, this is the lie that they told during a year when they swept the elections. What kind of lies do you think that they would tell when they lose? Now, you notice that the Democrat narrative on this is not to blame the Democrats' complete and thorough over-reliance on abortion must be protected at all costs. That's what cost them the election. They're sitting here going with an issue that was not a lunch pail issue, not a pocketbook issue. The election of 2024 hinged on the same thing that practically all American elections hinge on: the price of rent, groceries, and gasoline. But Democrats didn't do anything in the 4 years of the Biden administration. Kamala Harris wouldn't even talk about those things because the Democrats are in the hip pocket of the housing interests and the tech bros. I've explained to you, Silicon Valley is based out of San Francisco, Nancy Pelosi's congressional district, the town that gave us both Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris. And what did these guys do? These guys sat on their hands and allowed all of these interests to run roughshod over the American people, and they did nothing about it. That was the problem. So now they're trying to point at black people and say, you guys better stop causing us problems. But then again, you heard how this congressman also said that black voters support giving money to the police. That's a straight out of the RNC lie. That's a Fox News talking point. What the thugs in blue do is not policing. It's state-sponsored terrorism and oppression. And black voters do not want that. Yet you got this white man here saying that. Why is he telling that lie? For the same reason Clyburn did in 2020. Barack Obama was the first major political figure to attack woke. And he did it in direct response to demands to defund the police. That's where woke actually got put on the map for the rest of America. Black people already knew about it, but it actually passed into popular parlance because of the defund the police movement. And those young people making those demands, that was putting major pressure on the Democrats that they were actually going to have to come through with policy. And they made up their minds from the beginning they were not about to do that. And that's the reason why you had Obama out there attacking the young people in the streets, calling them thugs when they were actually the only real freedom fighters there are, and then attacking woke, and you hear Clyburn followed suit. This is what white power always does. It has some of its hand-picked bootlicks and flunkies, these front Negroes. They'll be the first ones to say whatever it is that their white paymasters want them to say, whatever anti-black slogan that their white paymasters are trying to push. And then once these Negro tools break the ice, then you have their white paymasters like the James Carvilles, the Cajun Skeletor, and you got people like this Jim Himes character. These people come behind them and they start saying the same things because that's what's meant to do. They know that they can't be the first ones to say it themselves because they would be immediately called out on it. So go ahead and have these little black sock puppets who are on their payroll say it for them. Then they can follow behind them, and that's what they always do. The same old playbook. That's how people like Bill Clinton were out there saying, well, I had to pass the 94 crime bill because these black pastors wanted me to. Black pastors wanted me to. That's the same lie that they're telling. Well, we have to make sure that we funnel billions of dollars to the thugs in blue. Why? Black people, they don't want to have the police defunded. See, it's black people who don't want the police defunded. Notice that he doesn't actually present any evidence of this. He just says it. It's what they always do. They point to some anonymous black people who they never actually present to you. Nobody ever actually comes forward and says, we're the ones who told these Democrats that the thugs in blue need more money and more guns and more equipment. That's not what happens. Instead, they just say it, and they know that whoever it is that they're talking to, as long as it's not the black media, there's not going to be any pushback to this lie. And you can tell that this guy is a liar because the only time white politicians like him ever say anything about black opinions is if it's something that they agree with. Oh, then they'll say, well, here's what black people are saying. Now, you never hear this Jim Himes character or any other white political figure say, well, you know what? Reparations is definitely something that we need to have on the agenda slate because black voters are in favor of reparations. So we have to do it. See, black voters, they support that. They don't do that, do they? Of course not, because they don't agree with it. Hence, black opinion needs to be ignored on that one. So learn to recognize a liar when you hear one. The reason these Democrats are repeating this nonsense is because the Democrats sent out the memo that they have to exercise message discipline and that they're going to be blaming everything on defund the police. And next they'll be sitting here saying, well, there's these Negroes out here talking about reparations. This is just a lunatic fringe, I tell you. It's been years since anyone said anything about defund the police in a major political election cycle. Democrats understand that if the base can force them to punish the enforcement arm of white supremacy, then the next stop is going to be to defund the white power structure that Democrats are beholden to as well. The Democrats understand full well, just like the Republicans, that in order for white supremacy to exist, it can only occur if the state has a complete and thorough monopoly on violence and one that has absolutely no checks, no balances, and no consequences. Now, why are these guys sitting here spouting these lies openly and boldly? The Democrats are lying their butts off because 40 years ago they made the decision that they were tired of being the party of FDR. Because although Democrats held office for the better part of 50 years, the problem was they weren't getting all that sweet donor cash like the Republicans were. So around the time that racist Ronald Reagan became president, the Democrats had begun a bunch of internal party programs and plans to make themselves acceptable to the kind of cash-fluid donors who would write big checks like the Republicans have been getting. This is where organizations like the Democratic Leadership Council came from. You've heard me talk about them before. The DLC is a group that basically said, let's change our rhetoric and make it more like the Republicans. And we need politicians who are going to talk like this. They produced people like Joe Lieberman and, most importantly, Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, who was the main one who pushed the Democrats hard to the right, claiming that the era of big government was over, and then signing all kinds of laws that cater to corporations, and of course the infamous 94 crime bill, aka Biden's law. And the DLC also, indirectly, was responsible for the rise of Barack Obama too. Democrats had made up their minds decades ago that they were going to stop pretending to cater to the party's traditional base, being black voters, unions, etc., and instead the Democrats were going to fully embrace a white suburbanite corporate base instead. Democrats' refusal to do anything for their base is what demoralized their own voters and has caused them to stay home for well over a decade and a half now. As a result, the white right capitalized on this by seizing state legislatures and governorships. See, that's the actual weight that the Democrats have been carrying that's been weighing them down and losing them elections. 40 years ago, Democrats coldly decided that they were going to turn their back on their own constituents. They allowed Ronald Reagan to carry out the gutting of the labor unions, and they allowed corporations like the car manufacturers to hypercharge sending jobs overseas, and the Democrats didn't say boo about it, so they were already abandoning the unions. And then 30 years ago, Bill Clinton and Joe Biden were waging war on black voters, all in the name of trying to settle up to all of these white suburbanites they were hoping to appeal to. Oh, we're going after these welfare cheats. The biggest welfare cheats in America are these white corporations who get all of this government welfare, aka subsidies. But they weren't concerned about that. That's the actual biggest cause of waste and fraud as far as social safety nets goes, all of these giveaways to these corporations. And then when the Obama years, you had the coup de grace. This guy decided that he was going to bail out Wall Street instead of bailing out Main Street. This is the reason that the Democrats have been losing election after election. The Democrats have spent decades showing their own voters that a vote for the Democrats will never translate into policies that the voters need. This is why the Democrats' black voter turnout has steadily trended downward since at least 2013, which was Obama's second term. That was long before anyone was saying a word about defund the police. The Democrats' own voters recognize them to be liars, like this Himes character, and that Democrats are just pulling a political con game. See, that's the weight that the Democrats are carrying, the weight of all their own lies. What this Jim Hines character is showing you is the Democrats' political strategy for 2026, and truth be told, going forward, it's going to be to lie and lie huge. Just be shameless about it. Attack the very people who are actually making demands that will put you in office, but doing it the wrong way. Just lie enormously. And then you can rely on a compliant, sympathetic media that really isn't going to push back very hard, assuming that they push back at all. Democrats became nothing more than a DC-based social club. As far as they're concerned, a political party only serves one purpose: to make the party's candidates rich. Democrats have outright refused to do anything for their voters for decades now. Every time they get control of the government, they just do the same grab bag of goodies and giveaways for corporations that we've always seen. That's the weight that the Democrats are carrying. But as the black media has told you for 15 plus years now, Democrats have already decided they would much rather whore themselves to corporations and lose elections than actually produce for the party's base and win. And they would also much rather lie about what they're doing than to own up to it. This congressman's lies also prove, as if we needed any more evidence, that Biden was never going to follow through on any of the phony promises that he made about police accountability. And just openly lying about this, what this shows you is this came from the top. This is what the party line is going to be, literally. We're just going to sit here and say it was defund the police, but that hasn't been a thing for years. Just keep saying it anyway. We need these niggers to be on notice that we're going to be blaming them for everything. In fact, truth be told, as I've told you, we should go ahead and claim credit for it. You're losing elections? Yeah, and you're not going to win them without us. Because what they think they're going to do is they're going to pivot and try to put together some sort of Frankenstein monster of a new constituency, comprised of white suburbanites, mostly white suburban women, they hope, who care about social issues like abortion, people who are on the left when it comes to issues like that, but who are hopefully fiscal conservatives who are going to vote the right way when it comes to Democrats' watered-down GOP slate, which is what the Democrats are hoping to put in place. What the Democrats are hoping to do is to institute a form of white nationalism, but only is not going to be as rude and in your face as what Trump and Elon Musk are doing, but the end result will be the same. Now, if you want to complain about something, why is it that this Himes character didn't say, you know what, all of this talk about transgenderism, that became an albatross around the party's neck? No, they weren't saying that, because the entire point here is to actually point to black people and say, you niggers need to toe the line. You need to stop sitting here putting demands on us. So he told a complete lie, but you better believe this is what the DNC memo told their members of Congress to do. Anybody ask what the world went wrong, tell them defund the police. But you need to understand this lie the congressman told came from DNC headquarters. You don't say something like that without this being the party line. Defund the police was a winning slogan in 2020. Cities were burning and the police were literally under siege in front of the world. And yet after months and months of that, Democrats not only dominantly won back the presidency, but they also took back the House and the Senate. All of this while cities were burning and the police were literally being spanked in the streets. That proves to you defund the police was a winning issue. At the very least, it didn't hurt the Democrats. And by 4 years later, it didn't even matter by 2024 because by then nobody was talking about defund the police. Not even Trump and the Republicans were talking about it last year. The energy in the streets to actually hold the thugs in blue accountable for their crimes, that won the Democrats' elections, and they know it. They also know that what lost them the elections is that party has become a whorehouse to corporations, and they keep having to invent lies to deflect from it. Republicans never attack their base. Democrats, on the other hand, are always attacking their own voters because they've noticed the trend that their voters are demanding that the Democrats defy the corporations and the donors who the Democrats have chosen to whore themselves to. Democrats want to keep on lying, getting their envelopes of cash and big donations from the tech bros and the hedge funds as they've been doing, and they want to keep continuing to hold office without actually doing anything for the people who put them in office. This is about maintaining a patronage system where Jim Clyburn can have his incompetent little daughter get appointed to the FCC, and then afterwards she goes on to get big lucrative quote-unquote consulting jobs working for the very communication companies that she was supposed to have been regulating when she was on the FCC. It's all a grift, a con, a scam. And the demands that people like you and I are making threaten that scam. The Democrats' entire political platform is to preserve the racial patronage scheme that is the United States, because that scheme has been very good to them. Where would creeps like Jim Himes or Jim Clyburn or Nancy Pelosi be if they couldn't hoard themselves to corporate interests? They would wind up like people like Gary Condit, penniless on the streets. That's where they would be. Why would anyone want to vote for or support a political party that lies about how it's betrayed its own base, that lies about its failures, that openly refuses to do anything that their voters tell them to do, and then claims that what the base demands is bad policy? Who has the nerve to go up to the people who they claim to want votes from and then tell those people, you guys are all a bunch of fringists, you guys are just a bunch of lunatics and kooks, I'm not going to do anything you say, all these things you're demanding that you claim you have to have for your survival, this is bad politics and I'm not going to do it. Now go vote for me. That's what this clown Jim Himes is doing. That's what the rest of the Democrats have done. The demands that are coming at the Democrats from their base are scaring these establishment tools. I'm the one who you heard saying that if the Democrats truly think that America is repeating the 1930s, then the obvious solution is the Democrats need a 21st century version of FDR. But as I've also pointed out, even the weak and flimsy morality, if it can be called that, of FDR, even that is too threatening to the current Democrat establishment. The Democrats of today won't even invoke FDR's name, because Roosevelt actually made fundamental changes to a system that didn't even work for white people. Democrats are stuck on the horns of a dilemma. Yes, obeying the base would win elections like it did in 2020, but it wouldn't win them the right way, which means in a way that doesn't change the status quo, in a way that pleases the party's donor base who they're utterly beholden to, which is the same base that the Republicans are. Now, the problem for the Democrats is all of their feculent attempts to try to pivot, to get some new base, to appeal to some new voters outside of the traditional voting bloc, well, that just hasn't been working. Rahm Emanuel's Biden Republicans never materialized, and those white educated women that Kamala Harris thought would turn out in droves to protect abortion, well, they didn't materialize either. Because white women understand that their position in the world isn't based on their gender, it's based on their race. And everyone knows that the Republicans are the most openly strident about protecting white privilege. Democrats are trying to create a new voter base, one that won't leave them vulnerable to the demands that black voters have been making. But it just hasn't worked. So we see Democrats trying to harangue and browbeat black people into silence. Have you ever seen any Republicans say that the angry white people in Charlottesville or elsewhere need to be quiet, that they're costing Republicans elections, even though that's exactly what they did? They run around with swastikas and Confederate flags, they storm the Capitol, they assault the police, they're chanting Jews will not replace us, they assault the police, kill people, and Republicans not only refuse to criticize these criminals, they praise these animals. People like Tommy Tuberville say, you call them white nationalists, I call them my base. This is what they do for violent racist traitors. Rather than denounce or even so much as criticize these creeps, Republicans instead decide, well, let's go ahead and sound like them. So you get garbage like moron DeSantis, Glenn Youngkin, Jeff Landry, Greg Abbott, and others who go out of their way to make it clear, oh, these little racists that you see with the swastikas and such, they set the tone for the Republican Party. And then you got Elon Musk giving Nazi salutes, and you got people pretending not to know why that's happening. It's because the Democrats have made the world safe for the racists to go ahead and just openly play to that kind of lowest common denominator in the society. That's what happens when you have a political party that is blatantly nothing more than controlled opposition, whose actual job is understood as nothing more than to make sure that a certain racial status quo is maintained. Make the world, or at least America, safe for white supremacy. That's the Democrats' job. And what do Democrats do regarding their own law-abiding peaceful voters? They yell at them, call them thugs, and claim that their demands should be ignored. We shouldn't be listening to you people, even though it was those voters' exact demands that put the Democrats in power. Democrat mouthpieces on cable have long said that Republicans aren't at war with Democrats, they're at war with democracy. Well, the GOP certainly has plenty of help on that one because Democrats are not at war with Republicans. Democrats are not at war with fascism. The Democrats are at war with their own base. Democrats see their base as either demanding things that Democrats are determined not to do, or they see them just staying home altogether. So understand that this is what I told you would happen. Democrats would not discover religion after their defeat and say, man, we get it now. We have to produce for our base. No, instead they would double and triple down on these people out here. They're just a bunch of far left extremists. We can't be talking about them. These guys are going to lose us elections. They would double and triple down on lying. They claim to be so concerned about fascism, and yet they lie day after day about the one thing that actually worked to get the Democrats in power. This is two political parties with the same overarching objective, to maintain the racial status quo. Black people have pushed, and now the Democrats are attempting to push back. This is going to be their strategy for 2026. They're not going to be running against Trump or Musk or against any alleged American fascism. Instead, we're going to see the Democrats and the white media working together to push the false narrative that the Democrats are going to move away from those far left extremists, the ones making all of those demands, all of this stuff that's just so unpopular with the American people. The Democrats, they're going to reinvent themselves by embracing white suburban values and embracing the police and basically a Reaganite platform in all but name. That's the Democrats' strategy. They're going to go out of their way and bet the farm on pushing this narrative that the Democrats, they're moving toward the center. The Democrats are so far to the right, they are what the Republicans were in the 1980s. So if they're sitting here moving toward the center, they should be moving towards us. But we know what that really means. They're not going to be moving toward us. They're going to be moving away from us. And they're going to be telling people, well, the Democrats are moving in the right direction. We're going to be trying to have sensible policies. We're going to be having moderates. The Democrats are not moderates. The Democrats are right-wingers at this point. And when their pathetic attempt to rebrand this pivot to the right as being some sort of move to the center fails, you can bet that Jim Hines or some other DNC whore is going to be back in front of the cameras telling more lies about their defeat. Only this time they'll probably add reparations to the mix too. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Wally Bilal, Faith Speaks Life, Gordon Gates, Rose Arnold, and Fred Williams. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.